you are in a situation where you've got some hardware purchases in front of you. Now, some of you know me real well. Others don't know my life story. My dad was an accountant. Did I have to put gas in the car, $5 when I took the car out for the night? Hell no. The old man figured out the depreciated cost of driving his vehicle at a miley basis and simply checked the odometer, coming and going, and said, Terrence, at 7 cents a mile, you owe me the following. I kid you not, that's how I was raised. What does it all mean? I'm a cheap son of a bitch when it comes to buying ham equipment. What's the issue, though, in the purchase of ham equipment and the marketplace in general? Progressively, fewer and fewer larger manufacturers making anything for the ham radio market. Why? I know it sounds unreasonable to you, but objectively, there's not a lot of markup on ham radio transceivers. Just listen to that as a fundamental, basic lesson in buying ham equipment. There's not a lot of markup on ham transceivers. So how does a company like Yaesu, or Kenwood, or ICOM, where do they make their money? How do they stay in business? Just guess.
Commercial market.
Well, really, I would just sort of expand the horizons and say more like, well, we don't necessarily have to make money on you on the sale of the rig. Talk to a guy that runs a restaurant with a bar. Find out what they make on the food.
Nothing.
A minimal markup. Where do they make their money?
Booze.
Booze and soda. It's the same way in the ham radio market, and that's what you have to pay attention to.
Booze?
In an MBA program, they call that the razors and the razor blades.
Yeah?
They sell the razors at or below cost,
Right.
because they're going to make it up on the razor blades. And the razor blade that they're selling you for 50 cents or $1 per unit costs them about a penny to manufacture.
So no kidding. I mean, there are some tricks to ham radio marketing and economizing in terms of what you get for your buck. Let's go to the most basic one, though, and this one just drives me crazy all the time. The power supply. And the lesson to be learned is, we have a couple millionaires in the club, but you know what? Even if I was one of them, I would still never buy the matching power supply designed for my rig. Why? Do you want to know where they make up their margin that they didn't get on the rig? On the power supply, which is dirt cheap to manufacture. And the markup is tremendous. Let me give you a couple prices. I was always a big fan, initially, of the Ten-Tech line. And the Ten-Techs have a very distinctive look, really kind of throwback, retro look. And the power supply that goes with the unit kind of reinforces that notion. So I finally had the money once to basically shelve my old TR3. I went up to HRO up in, Salem, New Hampshire? Mm-hmm. I strolled in and I said, I've got the money to get one of these Ten-Techs. And the Ten-Techs were still mass marketed in those days. So he shows me the thing, he gives me his opinion, which is he's really high on the rig. I get to play with the thing. 15 minutes into it, I'm blown away. I'm like, I'm taking it, this is an easy sale. So what's this gonna run me? And I don't know, might have been $1,400. And I said, now just for laughs, what's the power supply go for this rig? $259. And he says, of course, the real power supply for the rig is over there. And what's he pointing at?
Yeah, Astron.
A stack of Astron amps. And I grabbed the power supply and I said, I don't know, it kind of looks like a hybrid arrangement. He goes, this was Pete, if you knew Pete from the old days. He goes, oh, part of my deal is I'll put the adapter on for you right now. Whole point is, guy saw a loyal customer, knew he was going to make some money on the sale of the rig, resisted the urge to try and sell me the power supply. He didn't know me, but he could tell by the look on my face. I'm not plunking down $259 on a power supply, where the cost of manufacture might have been what? 35, 40 bucks? So, what do you want to do? You want to go third party. What are some of the brand names? Astron. And really, when you talk about the generic power supply, the Astron fits the bill. It's good old-fashioned analog technology. What does that mean? It means over the course of a lifetime, you may have to replace a switching diode or two, because I've blown them over the years, and the repair takes you about 5 minutes once you pry the cover off. They make a very good unit. They're a little bit on the heavy side. A lot of people will say, you know, getting that matching power supply, it gives you a great sense of aesthetics, you know? I mean, you're seeing the pieces of compatible equipment. It's very reinforcing. It's reinforcing. I put all my power supplies on the floor underneath my rig. They don't even see them. What the heck's the difference? Money. What do you spend for an Astron today? And we'll talk about other brand names, but no kidding. For a lot of people, kind of the standard is an Astron 20, but I've heard people debate whether that's really adequate for the purpose. Now, I'm mostly a sideband guy, do a little bit of CW, but not much. And sideband is not a 100% duty cycle proposition. So you can really stand to have a little bit more than that. And so sometimes buying just a conventional power supply for a regular 100-watt rig, you may be better off padding a little bit and get something in the 25 or 30 amp category. So I'll just explain that Andy's the one that always gives me the lecture about you're underpowered at 20, go to 25 or go to 30. The only thing is, though, is the manufacturer in question may not make them in those increments. But really, you'd never need more than a 30 amp supply. They're not the only third-party outfit out there. So we got a couple others. Now, again, I think I credited you, John, with turning me on to my brand name. You have the Sanslux, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, as I do too. And this is just a miscellaneous made in China kind of power supply. It's a switching unit. It's very small. If I really knew I was going to give the lecture, I could drag it out of my van and show it to you. It's a...
So, Ernest, don't you have a marker for the board? I thought you carried some markers for the
Yeah,
Oh,
the
excellent.
whiteboard.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, because I didn't bring my set.
Just-
That's
sorry, I
why
just-
we're living. This is
I just
great.
remembered.
This is great. Thank you. Anyway, the Sanslux models, very small. Probably the only thing I can tell you is I'm a little bit suspicious, though, about their ability to dissipate heat.
Just
But
check
mine's never
sure
given me a
it's
problem.
really dry erase marker.
Yeah, I've been there before. Low odor, dry erase marker. Yes, it's real. All right, and literally, I'm talking about a power supply that I use at home underneath my desk, but will also fit in the car. And we're looking at a front-on profile that's about this size. Again, when you're operating in a car or when you're in a tight space, you want to make sure they get plenty of ventilation, because my model doesn't have a fan in it. I'm assuming yours is the same way, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So that's one option, saves you a few dollars. Now, interesting enough, when AT packed up, as you know, the club became kind of the legacy owners of some of his equipment. AT had a really nice power supply. You don't necessarily have to go this far, but I will tell you, I'm increasingly impressed by this company and some of the accessories they make for the ham market. Is it Daiwa? I don't even know how they say the company name.
I think that's right.
But they're lately big into some quality power meters and also some nice power supplies. So the one I've got that I inherited kind of from AT, but it's really the club's, running about 200, 250 bucks. But this thing is a continuous variable voltage, variable amperage power supply that can fire up anything. So sometimes I will give you the following advice, which is if you're a real tinkerer or a real experimenter, that may strike you as a bit of a price premium initially, but if you're going to power up everything in your ham shack, you know what? It's not such a bad deal, all things said and done. MFJ makes a switching unit. They've been back and forth in their popularity. Sometimes I'll pick up like an eHam review, and oh God, this is the greatest thing ever going. And others, it's like, oh, the thing sucked out of the box. It raised more RF hashing than anything, and I don't think it's worthless. Do I think they have a good design? They probably do. What's the explanation? Their legendary quality control or lack thereof. The people that have bought the recent ones seem to be very high on them. Now, Fred, you got one, yes?
Yeah.
And you got one of the older
Several.
models.
All the ones I had worked fine.
Right. And you're using which model? 30 ampere or?
Well, I don't think it's quite 30 amp. It's a smaller, it's not one of the larger ones, it's one of the smaller ones.
Okay. My Sanslux out the door was about $100. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story on MFJ, by the way, people finally figured out what the problem is. Don't buy anything manufactured in September by MFJ.
That's what they're
The
trading for.
reason is, it's not a joke, most of the people who do the manufacturing in their plant are local college students. And when they come in September as newbies and they assign them and they've got them working on the equipment, they make a lot of mistakes. By November, December, they know what they're doing. So if you go down to their plant, you'll find 3/4 of their workers are local college students working part-time. If we break these guys up then into the two classic categories, remember, Terry's not an engineer. So I can tell you the analog ones I work with worked fine. Kind of clunky, a little bit boat anchory. The modern movement is to the switching power supply, which is what my Sanslux and John's is. But again, I combine mine with an Astron 20 that's just regular analog. Fred, 30 seconds or less. What are the advantages of a switching power supply?
Lightweight.
That's
very-
true.
They're very efficient, and their only real drawback is sometimes they'll generate RF noise, which is the one thing you have to worry about.
Right.
First one I had, would. If I was listening to 10 meters, I'd hear, ooh,
All across
and
the
I'd have to
band.
wave on the power supply to cool it off so that the birdie would go away.
The one comment I'll make too about the RF hashing interference is, I've seen some remarkably expensive, well-designed units that suffer from that problem, just like some of the cheap ones. So really, if you're looking for some advice, it helps to read the evaluations and the ratings that you'll see in a place, posted like eHam. But on the other hand, just looking at what your buddy's using, asking him if he's had predictable results and going with that model, sir, be well with John. That's all I can tell you, because really I was impressed with the size of yours.
Yeah. I've got a Jetstream now also.
Yeah.
That does well.
Well, that's...
It's a 29 or 30 amp variable voltage. It's got a number of ports on it,
Mhm.
including 4 Anderson power pole ports.
Excellent.
So and meters, and it's very nice.
So really, again, just to reinforce the point I made, John's kind of using that notion of the universal power supply. Have everything at home, power up everything off the power supply. Can save you a few dollars over that. As compared to the accessory guys, because you know what? We will occasionally sell the power supplies at the Hamfests that have been bequeathed to us in the Estates, and they are snapped up. Why? Because you got another guy that's got an Astron 20 to power his rig, but he's got a small VHF unit. And a wall wart won't do it, so he goes out and he buys himself an R10. And slowly but surely, all that money begins to accumulate. Now, I wanted to ask you, are you using a Jetstream power supply? Because somebody else was telling me they were using 2. You got 2.
I got 2 of them.
Okay. What kind of results have you had with them? Because I get mixed reports on them.
Problems.
No problems?
They're great.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had, mine's worked well. I get birdies with both the Sandlux and the Jetstream when I'm operating 40 and 80, not the other bands.
Right.
And I'm sitting on the same frequency for an hour or so.
Uh-huh.
And the noise will come in. And you just sit there. It sounds like somebody's keying up on CW. And the only way to get rid of it is to turn off the power supply for a minute or 2 and turn it back on.
We did have a brief sidebar discussion on this, and I just wanted to mention that there are some manufacturers, though, that will do their damnedest to keep you from being able to operate with a generic power supply. And I'm trying to remember, did we decide it was the FP1000 or 2000 that's got the dedicated power supply?
FT2000D, it's got this big long thing, and it's got the Molex connector
Right.
that has to plug into 2
And we're
different
talking
ports.
something like $350 out the door for their unit.
I got the whole thing together, but
What I have been told is that you can cheat, but cheating will require you to buy 2 third-party power supplies to handle the different voltage ranges that I think are intentionally designed into that rig. To do what? Sell you their power supply.
Now, the ICOM 746 and 756 have dedicated power supplies with oddball Molex connectors, but you can get the adapter from PowerWorks or build one yourself. It's a straightforward adapter. At least they're not different voltages.
Again, when I bought my Icon subsequently from Ham Radio Outlet, once again, Pete's there and he goes, oh, well, if you'll buy the rig for me, I'll handle the connector. Boom, boom, out the door you went. All right, that's it really for the power supplies, but I bring them up and I emphasize them a lot because that's where you want to save your money. But let's talk about some of the other accessories that will also kind of price you out and where money might be worth spending. Switches. Now, I'm trying to remember, you got one in the club collection, right? You've got the classic B&W rotary switch.
Yeah.
Antenna switch.
Yeah, there's 2 variations with this antenna switch. So I don't know whether you guys will recognize them. There's the one variation, the B&W one, that you used to usually use with a beam. And it was black Bakelite, and it had a bunch of numbered positions, kind of on a decal, and it would have the central switch. That's kind of a common approach, and you just throw the switch back and forth. There's only one problem with that line, though, and it was something that I discovered by accident. If you ever talk to purist hams who plan expeditions and are operating with linears and have to deal with multiple operations in a single enclosed area, one of the things they'll tell you is spending the extra money to get a good switch is really important. How did I learn that lesson? I was up at the Stanford Museum and Nature Center using the switch I borrow from Ernest every year, the B&W rotary switch. In its time, it was considered a great switch. I got my antenna in position 4. I've got the switch set to position 1. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, Europe's coming over 5/9. It's coming over on the slot. I don't have the switch set to. What is going on? Well, that's the blow-by factor. So when a ham tells you a good switch is worth paying for, because if you don't, you're going to hear other things you didn't want to hear. They're not exaggerating. The thing is, though, is these rotary switches, if you can pick them up at a ham fest, are still an excellent buy. You typically pay about 20 bucks for a 4 or 5 position B&W. So for occasional use, they're fine. But for high power operations, if you really want to have the integrity of a good switch, you'll be amazed what you're going to end up spending. So I happen to be a big fan of the Alpha Delta Band group and the products they make. So they make a bunch of stuff. But I will tell you that their switch, which is very pricey, and it's the basic sort of rectangular type approach, they're fairly common out there. You may have encountered one of these one time or another. And the idea with the Alpha Deltas is you have, again, central sort of switching dial here, and then you have typically a 5-position arrangement. In the middle is a grounding position. And for heavy-duty switches, that's always nice to have, right? So you got a beam, this is the inside operation, you get the ability to have the ground. Usually, on this unit that Alpha Delta sells, it's pretty pricey. I could have sworn I looked it up the other day, and these suckers are up to around $79.99. You may think that's a lot of money to pay for a switch. But what you also get is a built-in lightning arrestor. Not exactly the greatest arrestor you're ever going to have, but one nonetheless. That central position to be able to ground the beam during a thunderstorm, and absolutely no blow-by on that switch. I'm telling you, when you're switched to a different position, you hear nothing over the ring. Basically white noise, and that's it. Now, a little story about this unit, but don't hold it against the brand name. This is just me being a slob. I wanted to use one of these for a contest, so would you believe back in 2007, I ordered one from Alpha Delta mail order. I used it for the first competition, and I could have sworn that one of the positions was shorted out. But it was a very damp night. A couple months later, I pulled it out, and I could have sworn 2 of the operating positions on the switch were shorted out. The fact of the matter is I think they sent me a defective switch, but I never brought it to their attention in time within the warranty. I may call them to see if there's any usable, serviceable parts on it, but unfortunately, I don't think it is. But high-powered operations,
Do you want me to put up a photo? of it?
yeah, if you can pick it up, yeah, that would definitely help. It's worth the investment. Now, there's alternatives you can use, and let me just explain. Again, I'm the guy that cleans out all the estates. So what do we pick up over time? Switches. So what do I got right now? I get a heavy-duty MFJ switch, and I get a heavy-duty other brand name switch. I can't remember the brand name. And these are basically your 2 switching unit ones. Can we either drop the lights, or can you just give me a little bit more res? Because these guys will recognize this one, I think, as soon as they see it.
Oh, if I can.
A little spontaneous eraser used here.
Yeah,
Nothing like dry markers, right?
there's no reason.
This is the baby right here.
There it is. You
Yeah.
can say it's fine.
Excellent.
Warm it up.
So basically, here's your lightning arrestor position. There's your grounding switch position in the center. And you've got 4 positions and the dial. The dial has also switches with a nice, reassuring clunk. You know, it's not mushy at all when you start to move it. 79 bucks. But now follow me. What if you didn't elect to buy it all at once? So what I've got is the devil's dilemma. I've got 2 AD switches. Start to add up the money that's involved with all those, and once again, you're kind of better off anticipating all your needs and buying the bigger unit. Because you look at those quality 2-position switches, they're like 39 bucks a piece. Double them, well, you're in the same category, and furthermore, you're not paying for the extra coaxial leads that you have to buy to basically turn 2 2-position switches into the equivalent of a 4-position switch. So, despite my one unfortunate interaction with these guys, I do endorse the brand name. This is a very good switch. Any questions in the switch department? How many guys here own that model? It's pretty popular out there.
It's bulletproof.
Bulletproof? Yeah, I would say so. Like I say, except for mine. But, you know, I accept the fact that you make these by the millions. Every now and then one's going to come out wrong, and, you know, you got to be up and alert for it. I just wasn't, so. Yeah, actually, looking at the prices now, let's take a look. The 4-position N model, or the SO239, is $89.95, God help us, right? And now the N position model is getting up to 100 bucks. Pricey, but if you know you need the switching positions, it's worth making the investment up front. At least I think. All right, so that does it for the switches. Really, the last 2 things I want to focus on, and in a way they kind of all belong in the same category: tuners, test meters, and antenna analyzers. Now, we've got a couple of exhibits up here. And in essence, when I was growing up back in the 60s, every ham it was assumed, would eventually own what you might refer to as a voltmeter, or an ohm meter, or a volt-ohm meter, or a multi-tester, right? Depends on what was in fashion at the time in terms of what you wanted to call it. But right here, we just have the most basic example, right, of an RMS voltmeter. I will tell you that in the club junk pile, if anyone is desperately in need of a multi-tester, let me know. I'll fish one out of the junk pile for you. The club owns 3 or 4 of these.
Yeah, usually I have 8 or 10 in my basement that were rescued from me, and his son was throwing them out, and I just grabbed them.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
there's some Czech volt-ohm meter, but it works.
Right. Oh, you know, I gotta tell
Give it
you.
away for free. I don't know what to do with the damn thing.
Right. You have to go back to the days in the early 1970s where for a good precision-oriented analog meter, an engineer would think of plunking down nothing like 79, 80 bucks. This was in the 70s. That was a lot of money to buy something that with today's technology can be matched, basically with digital stuff. May look cheap, $10, $15. Do you remember the one that you handed me out of Irv's old collection? Where Irv, I think, was at a Hamfest was the story, and there was a wholesaler there who had these boxes of multi-testers. And I think that, he was just thinking at the time, Marv,
Yeah.
that he would just go out and buy a couple dozen and then give them to anyone in the club that wanted one, because he was paying the equivalent of $1 a piece.
Yeah,
I still got the one he gave me at home. It still works after all these years.
and when it doesn't work anymore, all you do is take it apart, put a new 9-volt battery
It's almost always
inside.
the
It's
battery.
good for another 5 years.
So, 1, if you need one, let us know. We'd be able to fish one out of the junk box. 2, just understand that for the vast majority of applications, you don't need anything special. Because what do you suppose the single most frequent use of a basic multi-tester unit is? Continuity checks. You know, you want to make sure the power's getting to the socket without risking curling your hair. If you ever need to use an accurate one, and you only have a cheap one, once again, contact us, because somewhere in the collection, we got a decent one, where if you're really doing precision testing and measuring, we'll have something that you can use.
Terry?
Yeah, good.
The one fact on that clamp-on, I want to point out that that's actually a high-end, in a way, it's AC or DC clamp-on. Cheap clamp-ons only will do AC, but that uses Hall effect. So it's, so that you can use it on DC. Found it very handy.
All right. Next item on the agenda. I love these. I don't know how anyone who's serious about building or putting up the antennas can live without having one of them. Except, once again, I'm cheap. So how many of these do we have in the club? Fred, this is yours,
Yeah.
and you've got one, and I've got one,
I got
you've got one, and I have the older version that's owned by the club at home
You don't know.
that came out of, I think, was it Leonard's collection? It might have been. That's an old analog version, but the equivalent. These guys are pricey. So now I think you've gotten to the point where this basic unit right here is like $259. That does not include the accessory package. That'll run you an extra 25 bucks. Power supply, the carrying case, whatever the hell you do. Don't buy the carrying case for this unit. What's the curse of the carrying case for this unit? Does anybody know?
Gets turned on and the batteries go dead.
The case that you put it in, for some odd reason, has got a shitty design that puts pressure against the on-off switch right here. And half the time when you think you've put it turned off in the case, you've activated it in the case, and your set of, what, 10 alkaline batteries in
Something
this
like
baby
that, yeah.
has just been tossed out the window.
Pelican case has a good case for those. Pelican makes.
Pelican? My whole point is, if you got enough money to burn that you want to own your own, feel free. But this is where a club comes in.
Turn it off.
This is where a club comes in. I'm sorry, did I leave it on? Oops, I've done this to Fred before. Now, the standard terms of me borrowing the unit from Fred for 3 months at a time is I would always assure him that I would replace the batteries on Mr. Ellison's expense account, which I always would. But like I say, don't get an individual one unless you're really an experimenter, because we got 4 or 5 in the club, and if someone doesn't want to loan you theirs, just call me and I'll come over and operate mine for you, take a few measurements. Economize here. And again, that's one of the nice things about having a club. Shared equipment. Is there any real need for anyone to buy a tennis ball cannon? Yes, there is. We need as many as we can have on field day. But beyond
We
that,
got 3 now.
but beyond that, do you really need to go out and buy one if you're going to put up an antenna once every 10 years? No, it just doesn't make sense. That's why clubs exist. Other comment on this one. It's useful, except Don't ever take the raw numbers that you get out of this thing to mean crap. All right? Why do I say that? A-B comparisons. Fred unit, my unit. Do you remember me calling you on the phone going, I just built this antenna, or I know I QC'd it right, this damn thing should be working, I can't understand the SWR, let me borrow yours. So I borrow Fred's, and guess what? My theory is confirmed because he's giving me the expected results, mine is giving me unexpected results. It did turn out in the end that his was more accurate than mine, but really it was kind of wishful thinking to think it was as good as Fred's or as bad as mine. How accurate are these guys? Judge them by the dip, guys, and don't take anything else seriously. Do you follow me? In other words, can you really calculate your 2-to-1 endpoints on one of these guys and do it accurately?
It's got to be the right temperature, too. If it's too warm or hot, it's going to be way off.
Well, yeah, there are coefficients and variables that never occurred to me. All right? WSTC, that radio tower downtown. Do you know that if we tried to do an antenna measurement right now, that signal shows up on this tester? How can I say that for sure? Because I live another mile that way, and guess what?
You pick it up.
I couldn't figure it out. Where do I keep getting these stray readings from? Why is it that it goes from a predictable reading to change in atmospherics, and all of a sudden, this thing's completely out of sight? You can pick up straight ambient RF with these guys, and it's a weakness of this unit. Now, what's interesting is I have one of the MFJ 929 tuners, the itty bitty little ones, not the super small ones, but they're about yay big. And what's interesting is they're not affected by that at all. So I don't know whether there's extra buffering mechanisms they put in or additional rejection filters that you get at the tuner level that you don't get in here. But don't overlook the fact that you can use your MFJ or whatever automatic tuner as an antenna analyzer and save yourself a few dollars that way. Had I known that the 929 had a digital built-in meter that was just about as good as this, I would have saved the money and never bought this thing and basically subsidized the purchase of the tuner by not buying this. So a good piece of test equipment, just don't buy one. We got enough in the club.
One of the reasons for that problem, when you're hand-holding the MFJ, is you are in the antenna. Your tuner is sitting on a desk, you're not holding it. Presumably your tuner is sitting on a desk. So you're acting as an antenna feeding a signal into that thing. That's one of the things. One other thing, if you're using one of these antenna analyzers, if you're trying to tune up a vertical, or if you're trying to tune up a low antenna of some sort, you have to move at least one wavelength away from the antenna. Otherwise, you become part of the near field, you become part of the SWR, you personally. And you can get some really weird results. Some of you were around the famous time that Frank Casella tried to tune up that HW8. Remember that thing? It was one of these verticals, multi-band
I remember. Yeah.
verticals. The poor guy worked literally all day. He started at 10 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, he didn't have it tuned for one single band. And it was every time he tuned something, and then something else would be off, and it was driving him nuts. And we finally figured out the problem, because he was standing right next to the antenna while he was doing with the antenna analyzer, so he was becoming part of the antenna. And once we moved him about a wavelength away, all of a sudden it settled down and he was able to get it tuned.
Well, I have a comment that it does more than just analyze antennas. There are a bunch of other functions where you can determine that you've got a defect in your coax.
I have used that coax detector, yeah.
Yeah.
I've used on mine. I don't have one of those. I have. There used to be I can't remember the name. Something Labs. No, something research that I have. It was $129. It was a wonderful antenna tuner. They went out of business because they were selling it for too little.
They are still in business.
Tech Research, that's it.
The itty bitty little one.
Yeah, it looks like a pack of cigarettes. Tech Research, no, they're not. I don't think they're in business. I've been looking for it.
Really?
But yeah, I just.
So I don't have to drive down to Maryland or fantasize about going down there to strangle that son of a bitch anytime soon.
No.
What?
They also had some bad manufacturing defects. I just put that up because the latest now is
I've
they
heard this
actually do a graph.
Yeah.
They actually graph your SWR for you.
Has anybody
Instead of
actually
having to take
played-
readings and move the thing and take reading, move the
Yeah.
thing? They just graph it for you.
There's another one, the Vector Analyst,
Yeah.
I think that Frank has. No kidding. No more screwing around. No more, oh, well, let's vary this by 10 kc for X number of cycles and see what the dip looks like. Hell no. Fire it up on one frequency and zip, out comes the chart. It's really something to behold.
No, on those guys. You know what he was famous for?
What?
The coax connector that wasn't mounted in the box.
Yes, right. That's exactly what I was talking about.
For years, people would say, you know, this is an economically priced device, and compared to the MFJ, it's a pretty good buy.
Half the
And it
price.
gives you good measurements and appears to be even more accurate than the MFJ. I think it was. Very little on the way of phantom readings, right? Now, he wouldn't tell you this, but then you'd read EHAM, and it would say, it's a great unit, but whatever the hell you do, handle the coax connector like it's gold, because all you have to do is force it 1/8 of an inch in the right direction, and the unit will never work right again. It will short out. This is a defect that he's had in the design since the day he first started selling them. Does he warn you about it? No. Hi. Yeah, so this is Mr. So-and-so? Mm-hmm. Well, my name's Martin, and I liked your unit, and I had it, and once again, the coax connector's busted. Well, it's a very simple repair. All you gotta do is, there's a warranty. I expect you to repair this. Well, once again, it's an easy repair. What kind of a hammer are you? What kind of a manufacturer are you that you sell me a cheap piece of shit with a connector that will Don't ever get me mad, guys.
Okay? And that's
Really?
exactly, I had the same conversation.
You guys, no, so you would have my perspective of, oh, this scumbag has no idea who he's dealing with, right?
I just soldered. It was a simple solder. Something broke and you just soldered.
But you understand my principle
Yeah,
here?
right.
No, you fucking fix it, it's your day, and it's
Never
3 months
fixed
into the
it.
warranty.
He never fixed the design.
He fixed mine. And really, I guess he must have gotten the impression I was just a maniac, because I didn't go through the, I'm going to trash you on every rating service on the face of the planet. Listening to my voice was apparently enough to intimidate him. But he was also rude to my wife. The afternoon before, I was on business, she called with the same thing, and he got in her face. Oh God, he's regretted it to this day. So I'm glad he's out of business. But you know what? If you see one of those units at a tag sale or at a ham fest, pick it up. And if the coax connector doesn't move in your hands and you plug it in and you get a reading, take it. If you can get it for 50 or 60 bucks.
Yeah. One thing, if you think that the switch on that one is exposed, you should see the on-off switch on the Gore-Tex. You really want to take the battery out when you're not using
Yeah,
it.
no, people have said that. All right, couple other things we got here. Now, to some of you folks, this will make no sense whatsoever. Now, Fred, is this yours?
No, mine.
Okay, and was this from Lenin's collection? I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember. Now, almost all the modern rigs today that you're buying off the shelf, and probably for the last 10 years, have got the DSP filtering built in. You have a boat anchor, though, and you want to retroactively have a DSP filter, you can get one of these outboard still. What do these guys go for? This is about 139 bucks.
I don't know. Look.
And you'd have to come to your own conclusions as to whether or not it's worth it. If I get an old Collins piece of equipment, an old receiver, I'm going to get a Collins crystal filter, and I'm not going to screw around with one of these. But they're a nice alternative if you've got a middle-of-the-road boat anchor and you're looking to just have some better filter.
Looks like they've got a high-end unit for 611. That doesn't sound right. No, it's somebody.
I suspect you're getting a bunch of things for that.
Yeah, it's. Oh yeah, these are all other companies selling. Let's say $150, $200. Yeah, and actually, if you're going to go that route, even if you have a DSP filter built into your radio, sometimes it's If you're going to go that route these days, you can buy software, run the audio through your computer, and the advantage of the software is not constantly, but it's regularly being updated. So they put in new algorithms to try to detect splatter, to try to detect static, things like that. It's all software. It's all programs sitting and looking at, well, that looks like a bunch of random noise. I bet you that's splatter, or I bet you that's static. And they update them, whereas those things don't get updated.
This in my hand here is a magical box, and we didn't even know what it was till we got it from Leonid.
No, actually, that one came from Mars.
Oh, this is the Mars one.
Yeah.
But you still got the one from Leonid, I'm thinking, right?
No,
Or do you?
you sold it.
Oh, maybe I did.
Yeah.
Okay. A noise canceller. Really kind of an interesting concept. These are very commonly used on 160 and on 80 meters. Now, to really appreciate this, you've got to have an antenna farm. But if you've never heard the principle, noise at 80 meters and 160 meters is really your major obstacle. So what you do is you put together a 2-antenna type system. And through the use of this box, you can basically switch back and forth the phasing between your 2 antennas. And if you work at it hard enough, you may eventually come up with a setting via this box that will completely eliminate all the electrical noise that you're experiencing on one of the lower bands. We really haven't tried it out, though. Did you ever try out that one?
Some, but I
Yeah.
don't have a good enough antenna.
Yeah.
This is something for someone that's got a big, low-band operation, 80, 160 meters typically. Now, this baby, fairly common, your classic Link USB interface. What'd you pay for this guy?
89, something like that.
Okay,
With the cables.
with the cables. And this is the only one I've ever really known. What is the competition with it?
Come on,
Rig Blast does.
And that I understand, but there was one other manufacturer out there I thought.
There's one that begins with an N, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably thinking of that, that small company. It was a funny name. It was like a $40 unit, but they're out of business. There are a couple of other high-end units. The company begins with an N. But really, the main two competitors are Signalink and West Mountain.
All right. Getting on just the subject of tuners, they really break down into three categories in my book. So let's just talk about them and what they're good for and whether they're really worth it in the first place. All right? Years ago, everybody was perfectly content. They had one of these. Your basic manual tuner. Youngsters will look at these guys today. Note that it requires manual adjustment, that you actually have to read a manual, know a little bit about RF to operate one of these things. And they're like, what would possess you to ever buy one of these things?
Because you play with the dials.
Well, then I came upon a little Facebook posting of a little girl that was one of my best friend's little sisters, who was a really cute grown-up. She was like a little sister to me, right? And she's posting what life was like when we were children growing up. So, Ernest, this is like the Grandpa Fred thing in Rugrats. So, you children don't know how lucky you have it. When I wanted to switch channels as a child, I had to walk 9 feet across a shag rug. To which I added, yes, and fighting dust bunnies the whole way. And you say this to children today, like,
Static.
what the hell are you talking about? Right? And uphill in both directions. But here's the whole point. In the old days, people were perfectly content to have a manual tuner. People were still getting into exotic antenna experiments. And if you're an experimenter like I am, you really need one of these. So what was the legendary unit of the old days? You still see these guys around. And I have to tell you, people hold these in reverence like Collins transceivers. The old Viking. So anybody ever seen the old Viking Matchbox unit?
2 of them.
2.
I don't have to. I've seen 2 over someone's house.
They're collector's items. You know what you were paying for one of those suckers back in the 1960s? $350, $400. And that was a lot of money. A lot of money back in those days. Now, rigs were fairly expensive too, so, by comparison, it was kind of in proportion. But today, you can replace that same Viking tuner, and I've got one. I wouldn't say it's the essence of quality control, but you remember the one you got me at Dayton? MFJ pretty much makes an equivalent comparison of the Viking tuner, and the thing is you would say, God, Martin, how can you possibly say this? MFJ compared to a Viking? But the fact of the matter is a lot of the technology has reduced the cost of manufacturing, and I think you got that for me out in Dayton for $180. Basically half the price, all the same functionality.
Do you remember which model?
I can't remember, but mine is the one that covers 160 through 10.
Manual?
9.6 something.
Manual or,
It's a manual. And it's a matchbox equivalent. So in other words, you're not running coax on this thing, you're running twin lead at one end, and the coax comes out the other end. There's no bound involved because the twin lead feeds the tuner. I've got a whole assortment of these guys at home though, by a couple of brand names. So I own 2 of the manual tuners. I've got that and an MFJ. And I also own a couple of the portable tuners that are from LDG and a couple of them that are from MFJ. Why does anybody ever buy one of the portable units? Think about it this way. Portable remote is really a more accurate way to describe it. Here's my doublet dipole, right? I'm feeding it with some ladder line. Pardon my lack of artistic talent. Right? But the ladder line comes down, and if possible, the best place to put that tuner is at the base of the ladder line. But now assume that you're operating inside a house, or like I am, up at the observatory, or in my van a lot of the times. I'm in the van. The twin lead feeds to a table or a stack of logs next to my van. The remote tuner is at the end of that twin lead, and the coax run is 10 to 15 feet from where that tuner is back to my house, or back to the car. What's the advantage of using that approach? Because a lot of people say, well, there's nothing special. So you got coax coming out of the back of this baby, here's your rig, over to your operating position. Doesn't this work fine? Well, it does. But if that piece of coax, right, between the rig and the ballon, if you will, and the twin lead is too long, you're dissipating an awful lot of RF. In other words, the stress point becomes that coaxial connector, and there's very high losses involved in that. Instead, you put the tuner right at the base of the antenna. So the tuner's here instead of a ballon. It's actually a tuner and a ballon. And through the coax now, you've got a tuned signal going from the tuner to the rigger. And there are no stress points. And the losses are greatly diminished as a result. And you're not spending an awful lot for remote tuner technology at this stage of the game. So you can go out and get an automatic tuner and spend $230. You can go with one of the MFJs that's got a remote model where they basically just take the same guts and they throw it in a cover that's waterproof and they mark it up an extra $30. So I highly recommend these, especially when you're dealing with a multi-band antenna situation and where it's impossible to bring that twin lead inside your house. How many of you guys do that? So you have the MFJ interface unit for doing that, don't you?
No, I have, used to have a LDG.
Okay.
Well, LDG is not a remote tuner, it's a regular.
No, it's, I was
have
pointing
this-
to the picture.
That's a nice one.
I have this one right here,
That's a nice one.
and it sits, like Terry said, I've got about a 40-foot run of coax out to the remote, and then I have the lateral line coming out of the tuner, going up to the antenna. And, you know, like, on most bands, I'm getting 1.1, 1.2 maybe, SWR, because everything is matched. The tuner matches the 50 ohm all the way out to the tuner, and then it matches the lateral line coming out of the tuner.
And it's just amazing to switch bands. Just chomp, chomp, chomp.
Yeah.
Key down once, zip, 1 to 1, and you're on the air. I mean, there's something to be said to that
It's
approach.
got 2,500 memory, so it remembers pretty much any frequency I'm ever going to use. You know, all it needs is about a half second of carrier, and it tunes right down.
Now, I'm not much of an artist, as anybody can tell, about my artwork. This is a simulated window. This is the sash across the bottom of the window. What is possibly the most overpriced accessory in the world today? That MFJ interface unit. Well, I mean, if you got money to
It's a
spend,
piece of junk.
if you got money to spend, what the heck, why not? I will tell you it's very practical. So if you've never seen one of these in actions, guys, what it's doing is giving you the solution to bringing the twin lead into the house, if you want. So the idea here is that MFJ manufactures a unit. It's pretty evenly spaced, but I think it's predictable window width, if you follow me, because there is a standard width.
Yeah.
And it fits very well. You basically squeeze it in, you close the window on the board, and you're done. And that sucker now costs what? What's it up to?
100, almost 100 and something bucks.
Oh yeah, when they were first
That's
introduced, they were
it right
60
there. And it
bucks.
comes with a stupid hunk of pine.
Right.
To go
Here's one
across the
that's
top.
54.
Right. They were overpriced initially at 54, as far as I'm concerned. But now, does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Because here it is. And the idea here is this baby just squeezes in between the bottom of the window and the sash. You might put some insulation around it, right? And there's an outside and there's an inside. So you have a bunch of those long coax extenders that are built into the board.
Well, that plate is on a piece of pine
Yeah.
Okay.
that sits at the bottom of the window, and
How long would it take anybody with minimal shop 101 skills to produce an equivalent unit? Not as aesthetically pleasing, not as snazzy, but will basically do the job. Oh, how about $5 for like the 2x4, a couple of strips of insulation for the sash, and a drone, right? And if you're really a slob like me, instead of having to artistically do the holes, right? Split the 2x4 in two with a table saw, right?